What's up, y'all? It's your girl S to the C Scorpio, S to the C twerk goddess. Alexa, stop. So today I want to talk to you all about grief and loss, because it's something that, again, we don't talk about. And you know, a lot of people have suffered from grief and loss. There's a lot of misconceptions about grief and loss, and there's 5 stages of the grieving process. And so I just wanted to share this video with you today so that we could address grief and loss and what it is, and, you know, ways to deal with it, especially during these times. We've had a rough 2 years with the whole situation, you know. And so when we talk about grief, it's a normal response to loss during or after a disaster or other traumatic event. And so grief, it can actually occur in response to loss of life, as well as drastic changes in your daily routine and your lifestyle. And it generally brings us a comfort and sense of stability. So when things change, you know, for example, you know, a breakup, you know, ending of a friendship is not just the loss of a life of someone. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, some people experience multiple losses, you know, due to a large scale of disaster or an emergency event. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of us weren't able to be with loved ones, whether it was like an elder family member that was in a skilled nursing facility or a nursing home. You know, they weren't allowed to have visitors. If you had someone that was in the hospital, you know, it was a lot of restrictions when it came to visiting and stuff. And so that would cause like grief, you know, for the families that weren't able to be with one of their loved ones that was dying, or just the whole way that things shifted from, you know, how funerals and burials and memorials were done. You know, a lot of times we weren't allowed during this whole 2-year situation. We weren't allowed to meet, to congregate, or to be with family and friends. So when we talk of loss, there's different types of losses that cause pain. So for some, it could be unemployment. Now you might be thinking like, you know, why would someone experience pain because they lost a job? Well, I'll share a little bit of my personal story with you. I used to work at a law office, and the guy, the supervisor that worked in the law office, he was a lead attorney and, you know, top ranking position in the company. And so he was making passes at me. And I asked a coworker, like, this white man, like, he always staring at me. He hugged me during a party, employee party that we had. So my coworker's like, well, maybe he likes you. He likes black women. And I'm like, whatever. So I wasn't, you know, receptive to his unwanted sexual harassment. And so, long story short, I ended up losing my job, you know, and that really devastated me because I was pursuing a career in law. And so I was considering going to law school. You know, for those of you that know me, I'm very good, you know, in the legal department. And so when I lost my job, I was fired to no fault of my own, all because I had a manager that, you know, I wasn't receptive to his sexual advances. And so I lost my job, and that caused me pain because I really liked my job. That was, you know, what I was doing at the time. And so, yeah, that definitely caused me a lot of pain. My family started looking down on me because I lost my job, and it was just like, it wasn't my fault. But anyway, other losses that cause pain could be a loss or reduction of supportive services, or family or lifestyle changes. So, you know, a person could lose their income, a person could, you know, lose a family member, a person could lose certain relationships that they had with people, and it will cause pain. Another thing that we don't talk about that occurred during the whole COVID-19 pandemic was people lost their housing. You know, a lot of people were unable to afford their mortgage or their rent, you know, due to no fault of their own. You know, a lot of businesses shut down. A lot of people lost their companies, you know, so there was a loss of shelter, and that could definitely cause pain because, you know, everyone, that's a basic need, you know, housing and shelter, that's a basic need just as well as food and clothing, you know. So when someone loses their housing situation or becomes homeless, that could definitely, you know, cause pain. Another loss that causes pain is the lack or ability to not see the people you love. So, you know, I know we live in a society where independence is promoted, and you know, you hear about independent women, and you know, there's songs about it and stuff like that. But the reality of it is that one of the human basic needs is love, affection, and attention. And so some people don't have like a family support system. Some people don't have, you know, affection, you know, so that could definitely cause loss or cause pain as well. So when it comes to dealing with the grieving process, you know, and how people process grief, it's no rule book on, you know, how to deal with grief. There's no time frame, you know, although a lot of people will say get over it, or, you know, your loved one passed 20 years ago, why are you still mourning their death? Well, each individual grieving process is just as unique as a fingerprint, you know. So individually, you have to do what's right for your soul. So there's 5 stages of grief, and you know, that's the denial and isolation stage. There's the anger stage. There's the pact or negotiation stage. There's also a depression stage, and then lastly, it's acceptance. So when people are going through grief and loss, you know, they'll deal with denial, like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. You know, I just talked to my loved one yesterday. Why did God do this? You know, the denial. And so denial, again, is a part of the grieving process. It allows us to cushion the pain of unexpected and impressive news. And it's also a defense mechanism. So, you know, a lot of times people are in denial. They may pick up the phone to call a loved one that passed away because, you know, they're still having a difficult time processing the grieving process and, you know, going through the emotions. Another stage to the grieving process is anger. And anger is defined as experiencing anger or rage after the loss. So a lot of times people that go through anger during the grieving process, they may blame others, or they may even blame themselves. You know, like, for example, they might say like, why me? Or, you know, it's not fair. And so anger is a necessary stage for the healing process. And we have to be willing to feel our anger, you know, even though it may seem like, oh, you know, I've been going through this forever, you know, it's taking forever. You know, the more you truly feel it, the more you'll begin to dissipate the anger, and the more you'll heal. So in my community, it's really important to do the inner work and heal. But again, there's no set time process. There's no you know, rule book on how a person goes about dealing with grief or loss. And so, yeah, denial is replaced by anger and resentment, you know, and the whys arise. So again, why did this happen, or why me? And so it's a difficult face to face, you know, and your family, your friends, your loved ones around you, if someone is showing signs of anger because of loss or grief, you know, family and friends, they shouldn't take it personally, and they shouldn't feel like you're attacking them. You know, people that go through anger, sometimes they're hostile, sometimes they're irritable. And, you know, if you care about this person and you love them, you will be supportive of them, and you will be understanding. So the third phase or stage in the grieving process is bargaining or negotiating. And a lot of times when people are faced with the difficulty or the reality and anger, you know, people become angry with God. People become angry with those closest to them. And so during this phase of trying to reach an agreement or overcome the traumatic experiences, sometimes this bargaining or negotiating will definitely arise. So now we'll get into the 4th stage of the grieving process, and that is depression. So a lot of times when people face a loss, some people feel a deep sadness, and it can lead to depression. So if you know somebody that is struggling with depression, try to be a listening ear, try to be supportive, try to be non-judgmental, you know, and understand that it is a temporary and preparatory state for acceptance of reality. So people need to do what works best for them, you know, and it can be counterproductive to try to encourage someone that's suffering to look on the positive side. So for example, you know, people going through it, you know, sometimes people could be really insensitive and be like, oh, well, you know, at least you're still here. Okay. You know, you may have lost your whole family, but at least you're still here. That's not effective, and that's not helpful for that person in that situation. So it's important to be aware of that and just allow that person that time and that space to heal. And again, the fourth stage of the grieving process is depression. You know, it's a stage where communication and support is very necessary. So, you know, just be supportive of the person and try to communicate. Even if they're wanting to be isolated and, you know, standoffish and withdrawn, just let them know that you're there when they're ready, you know. The fifth stage of the grieving process is acceptance. Now, some people don't ever reach this point to where they accept what happened, you know, and over time they're understanding. And so reaching this stage in mourning is a gift, and it's not afforded to everyone. You know, when we talk about death, death can be sudden, you know, death can be tragic, unexpected, you know, and sometimes we can't see beyond our anger and our denial. And so it's necessary to be brave and resist the inevitable, and don't deny yourself the opportunity to find peace. You know, when we talk about acceptance during the grieving process, don't get confused and believe that acceptance is a happy time. You know, it's the beginning of obtaining a closure to the loss. And so hope is what sustains and gives us strength to think that all pain has some meaning. You know, we know that everyone has a birth date, and everyone has a day that they will leave this physical realm. They'll leave their physical body. So knowing that, you know, everyone has their date. So that should kind of help with like some of the shock and disbelief or denial. But some of the common reactions to loss is to go through shock or disbelief. Some people experience anxiety. Some people have anguish or anger. Especially, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, say, for example, you lost a family member to a drunk driver or a violent crime. Yeah, the anger and the anguish is to be expected. It's understandable because, you know, it was a sudden loss, you know. But some people that have died of natural causes, you know, their family members may also experience, you know, shock, disbelief, you know, anxiety, anguish, anger, periods of sadness, loss of sleep and appetite. And so some of the things that we can do if we lost a loved one, it's really important to connect with other people. Now, some people like to be isolated. You know, some people just want to be to themselves so they could do the inner work. But it's important to, if that person is open to connecting with other people, just, you know, receive them with open arms. Don't judge them, or don't try to rush their process, because it's their process. It's not yours. Another thing you could do if you're dealing with the loss of a loved one is you could create a ritual or a memory. So for some, you know, they could like scrapbook all the photos of that person or all the good times, or listen to music that the person liked, or, you know, for example, when my great-grandmother passed, our family kept her legacy alive, and so we continued to make enchiladas. That was one of her favorite dishes that she loved to make, and we sort of tweaked the recipe a little bit, but it's a traditional thing within my family. Like, all the women in my family make enchiladas as a tribute to my great-grandmother that passed away. So you want to keep the person's memory alive, and, you know, think about all the positive things about that person. Another thing to do if you lost a loved one is you can ask others for help. Now, I know I mentioned, you know, we live in a society where everyone wants to be independent, and, you know, a lot of times we don't like to call on others for help, and we're self-made a lot of times, and, you know, we do things on our own. But, you know, if you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, it's okay to ask for help, and hopefully you have a good support system that is open to help you, you know, during that time. And it may be something as simple as go to the store for me to get my groceries, or I need help cleaning up, or whatever it is, you know. But you want to get back to your routine as soon as you can. Now, for some, that may be longer than others, but you know, it's important to get back to it when you can, on your time. Don't let no one rush you. Don't let no one force you through your grieving process, because only you know what that feels like. Only you know that pain. And so take as much time as you need, but also try to get back to your normal routine. So when we talk about the COVID-19 pandemic and the stigma, there is a stigma associated with people that have had COVID-19, or, you know, family members that have passed away because of COVID-19. Some people may try to avoid communicating with you or your family or friends, you know, when they normally would. And so, yes, it's a very big stigma surrounding COVID-19, because, you know, no one wants to be sick. You know, there's various variants that are continuing to be released or spread or whatever like that. And so one important thing is that viruses don't discriminate. So we have to be more compassionate and more sensitive to people that may have experienced the loss of a loved one due to COVID-19. And so, again, when we talk about grief and loss, it's not exclusive to the loss of a loved one, you know, or a family member. It could be the loss of a pet. It could be the loss of a job. It could be, you know, a divorce. You know, it could be moving to a new environment, moving, you know, from your old neighborhood to a new neighborhood. That may cause you pain, because now you're not around your old friends and now you have to make new friends, you know. So these are other types of losses that has caused people to suffer. So it's important to always acknowledge your losses and your feelings, and consider developing new rituals, a new daily routine, just so you can stay connected with loved ones and replace those that have been lost. A good suggestion would be to start like a YouTube channel or a social media platform, a podcast or something, to where you can, you know, connect with like-minded people and, you know, share your experiences and share your thoughts, and really create like a support network of like-minded individuals. Another thing you could do, if you suffered any type of loss, if you're concerned about future losses, you know, try to stay in the present. Focus on the areas of your life that you have control on. So a lot of times, you know, we try to be in the future and we think about the future, and that can definitely cause anxiety. It could cause people to worry. So, you know, staying in the present, because I mentioned before in one of my other videos, it's called the present because it is a gift. So when we deal with children and children dealing with death or loss, ways that you could explain that to a child, you know, if you're quiet and you don't want to tell the child what happened because you think the child can't cope with it, that actually, you know, it could cause for resentment or anger or frustration, because the child may begin to question like, oh, where's Uncle so-and-so? And, you know, keep it age appropriate though. You know, you should provide a clear explanation, you know, be direct as possible and tell the truth, you know, age appropriate though, for sure. And also, if they have questions, answer the questions honestly, you know, tell them information and be blunt, you know. And also give children security. So when you want to support a child that's dealing with a loss, allow them to participate in certain funeral rites according to their age. So my uncle was a famous jazz musician. He played the piano. And when he passed, I wrote a poem for him. And so my family allowed me to read the poem at the funeral. And that was very helpful for me at that time. Even now, sometimes I'll occasionally play the piano. He taught me how to play the piano. So you definitely want to help children deal with the losses by remembering the person, all the great things that the person, you know, contributed to society. Another thing you could do is allow the children to participate, you know, in the funeral planning. Like I mentioned, they let me write my poem. I read it at the funeral and they actually put it in his obituary. So, also just letting the children take part in it and explain what death is. And another thing, allow the child to know what they'll experience. So if you're going to see the person that passed at the memorial or the viewing of the body, let the child know that, hey, you know, our family member passed, and you know, they may not look the same. They're going to be in a casket. You know, their skin may be cold, or, you know, whatever, just to kind of prepare them mentally for what they're going to see and experience. So some of the warning signs that when a child is dealing with grief and loss, if they're crying for excessively or prolonged periods of time, that's something that, you know, you definitely want to be mindful of. If they're having tantrums, if they're changing their behavior at school, or they're not going to school, if they're constantly imitating the deceased person or expressing the desire to be reunited with the deceased person, if they're fearing being alone, or they're having nightmares or sleeping problems, that's something that you definitely want to keep an eye on, because you may need to seek professional help. You know, there's group therapy available, and there's support groups for adults and children. And so when teenagers deal with loss, you know, they experience grief similar to that of an adult. And so adolescents, teenagers, they need to recognize their feelings of guilt, sadness, and emptiness, and also have someone supportive that they could communicate with and share their feelings and emotions. And so one thing about adolescents dealing with loss is if it's not resolved properly, it can end in problematic ways. So some of the ways that manifest are depression, you know, physical pain, defiant behavior, promiscuity, suicide attempts, school dropout, alcohol and drugs. And what I found is a lot of times, just in general, teens, adolescents, they gravitate towards their peers, you know. And so you definitely want to keep an eye out on them, because you don't want them surrounded by negative influences. You don't want them having suicidal ideation, or you know, turning to drugs and alcohol, substance abuse to cope with the pain. So be supportive, be non-judgmental, and if they're receptive to communicating with you, always be a listening ear for them. So here's some things that you could say to a person that has suffered a loss. You definitely want to acknowledge their loss and their personal experience and their pain. You could also let them know, hey, I'm sorry for your loss, or I'm thinking of you. If you didn't know the person, you could say, hey, I didn't know your loved one that passed, but I wanted to let you know that I'm thinking of you and your family. And, you know, just be supportive and present. And so we have to be present today. You know, there's a celebration of life, and it's more focused on telling stories of the deceased and commemorating the life that they lived. So be thankful for each day. And again, there is professional help available. You know, if time has passed and a person is having severe depression or anxiety, and it's affecting their ability to be productive, they should definitely consider professional help. And again, there are support groups, there's individual therapy, and a variety of programs and services like that. So I just want to encourage you all, you know, we all have, it's a part of life, you know, dealing with grief and loss. It is a natural part of life, and everyone at some point will have to deal with it. And for some, it's more challenging than others. So let's not be judgmental on people that are dealing with grief and loss, whether it's the loss of a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or it's a loss because of a divorce, or it's an actual physical loss because one of your family members or loved one passed away. We all need each other, you know, and we, you know, we're human. We all have similar experiences. So that's that on grief and loss. I hope this information helped you. Hope you can share this with somebody that may be having a hard time dealing with grief and loss. Again, it is a process, and there are 5 stages of grief. So with that being said, I'm going to conclude this video. Thanks for tuning in. It's your girl S to the C Scorpio, S to the C Twerk Goddess. Shout out all my Eastside babies, and I'll talk to you soon.